The asphalt of Interstate 70 cuts through the Rocky Mountains like a multi-billion-dollar tourist conveyor belt. Roll the windows down, breathe in the pine-scented air, and it is almost impossible not to buy into the myth of the American high country. It is a landscape engineered for postcards, alpine ski chalets, and pristine mountain towns that look like they were built exclusively to help wealthy urbanites escape reality. But pull off the highway, take a hard left past the groomed slopes, and the facade vanishes. Right now, a quiet, systemic rot is eating through Colorado's high country. This is not a standard market correction. It is an economic eviction. Once vibrant mountain communities are transitioning into something cold, hollow, and functionally dead before our eyes. The romantic dream of owning a rustic cabin or running a lucrative short-term rental has turned into a mathematical nightmare. Independent economic models are quietly flashing a terrifying projection. Home values in specific alpine zip codes are sitting on the precipice of a catastrophic valuation cliff, facing a projected collapse of 57 to 72%. To the casual observer, that sounds impossible. Real estate in Colorado has been treated as a bulletproof asset class for 3 decades. But the bubble was built on unstable ground, propped up by a lethal combination of transient pandemic money, speculative greed, and a fundamental misunderstanding of rural geography. For 3 years, affluent buyers treated these remote valleys like safe deposit boxes with mountain views. Now, the trapdoors are swinging open. The mechanism of this collapse is a perfect structural storm. It is a collision between dying local legacy industries, aggressive municipal crackdowns on short-term rentals, and a massive, forced exodus of remote workers who suddenly realize that a tech salary cannot insulate you from the brutal logistics of high-altitude survival. The people who actually keep these towns functional, the snowplow drivers, the paramedics, the line cooks, the water treatment mechanics, have been entirely priced out, leaving behind hollowed-out playgrounds with no foundational economy to support them. When you strip away the luxury aesthetic, you are left with a collection of hyper-isolated, single-industry towns facing structural failure. If nobody can afford to pour the coffee or fix the ruptured water mains in January, the million-dollar real estate valuation is a fiction. The smart money is already quietly liquidating, fleeing a regional crisis that is about to permanently rewrite the rules of American rural real estate. We are going to map out the precise anatomy of this collapse, tracing the economic fault lines across 10 distinct Colorado communities that are rapidly transforming into modern ghost towns. We will look past the marketing brochures and analyze the raw data: surging inventory, vanishing buyer pools, crashing nightly rental revenues, and underwater mortgages that are anchoring families to sinking ships. This is the ultimate warning label for the American West. If you think the luxury real estate market is immune to reality, you need to see what happens when artificial appreciation runs out of oxygen at 10,000 feet. Keep your eyes on the horizon, because the final destination on this journey is a world-famous billionaire ski haven where the speculative bubble is bursting so violently it defies basic market logic. The numbers there do not just suggest a downturn, they outline a complete wipeout of artificial equity. The steep descent begins right now. Let us look at the first fracture in the Alpine illusion. To trace the roots of this real estate crisis, one must look at the structural vulnerabilities engineered decades ago. Colorado's mountain economy was built on a dangerous geographic paradox. Land is physically abundant, but topographically unusable. The federal government owns more than 36% of the state's total landmass, controlled primarily by the United States Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. In mountainous counties like Summit, Pitkin, and Routt, that federal footprint expands to swallow 70 to 85% of all available territory. This dynamic created an artificial chokehold on private development, trapping local municipalities in a physical bottleneck. As a result, housing inventory in the high country could never naturally scale to meet shifting regional demand. For the latter half of the 20th century, this artificial scarcity acted as a price floor, protecting property valuations from national market downturns. However, the geographic trap became an economic weapon when the state's primary economic engine transitioned away from extractive industries toward a highly seasonal, tourism-dependent model. The transformation was not accidental. The decline of Western Slope mining operations in the late 20th century forced municipal governments to aggressively pivot. Towns that once pulled silver, molybdenum, and coal from the earth re-engineered themselves into playground municipalities. Local planning commissions systematically rezoned industrial and agricultural parcels to accommodate ski resorts, luxury lodging, and secondary vacation properties. This policy decision tied the long-term solvency of local public infrastructure directly to luxury consumer spending and out-of-state capital flight. The structural flaw in this strategy became evident during the massive capital migration that began. In early 2020, a flood of affluent, non-resident buyers weaponized urban purchasing power against a stagnant and confined housing inventory. According to transaction data from the Colorado Association of Realtors, home prices across 10 major mountain counties surged by an average of 62% between 2020 and 2023. In hyper-isolated submarkets, the rate of appreciation was even faster, completely detaching local real estate values from regional wage structures. The economic disconnect is starkly visible in the historical trajectory of individual municipalities. Craig, located in Moffat County, historically insulated itself from tourism speculation by anchoring its economy to the Yampa Valley Electric Association and the nearby Trapper and Coloyo coal mines. The town was built on steady, blue-collar utility employment, however. State-mandated carbon reduction targets, specifically the Colorado Clean Energy Plan, forced an accelerated timeline for the decommissioning of the Craig Station power plant. The impending closure of all 3 units by 2030 represents the immediate errors of more than 40% of the county's property tax base. The historical data proves that single industry energy towns cannot absorb a systemic labor contraction without experiencing a corresponding real estate capitulation. With 600 high-wage utility positions slated for elimination, the local market lacked the diversified consumer base needed to absorb the sudden influx of residential listings. Active inventory in Craig expanded by 42% in a 12-month period, while median days on market stretched to 85 days. This structural inventory bloat is the mathematical precursor to a major valuation adjustment. Further south, in the San Luis Valley, Alamosa exposes the severe vulnerabilities of the region's agricultural baseline. Positioned at an elevation of over 7,500 feet, Alamosa relies on the Rio Grande Basin to sustain its potato and barley industries. Over-allocation of water rights, combined with historical state-level litigation regarding groundwater depletion, led to the implementation of strict water pumping sub-districts. Farmers were forced to pay steep financial penalties for every acre-foot of water extracted beyond historic averages. This environmental and legal bottleneck severely degraded the underlying value of regional real estate. When agricultural yields declined due to mounting operational costs, the local economy stalled. The United States Census Bureau documented a local poverty rate of 23%, yet residential real estate prices surged temporarily due to inflation. That artificial valuation peak has collapsed. Recent market reports from Realtor.com indicate that 55% of active residential listings in Alamosa underwent deep price reductions as the cost of basic utility infrastructure and water access outpaced local income growth. On the flat Stern Plains, Sterling faced a parallel structural crisis driven by agricultural consolidation and corporate logistics shifts. As a historical shipping and retail hub for Logan County, Sterling's housing market depended on a network of multi-generational family farms and independent local businesses. The steady centralization of agricultural supply chains by global conglomerates reduced the need for a localized workforce. The Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City reported an 18% decline in regional agricultural net income over a 36-month window. The loss of local purchasing power triggered a chain reaction in the town's real estate ecosystem. Commercial vacancies in the downtown historic sector reached 21%, removing critical consumer amenities from the immediate area. Concurrently, Zillow recorded a 51% expansion in active housing inventory. Without an incoming labor pool to absorb this supply, residential values fell for 8 consecutive months, marking a cumulative loss of 14% from the historical market peak. The pattern repeats in Rifle. a city long subject to the intense boom and bust cycles of the Piscience Basin natural gas reserves. During the hydraulic fracturing acceleration of the late 2000s and mid-2010s, Rifle experienced rapid residential expansion. Speculative developers constructed hundreds of medium-density subdivisions to house transient energy workers. The Colorado Department of Labor and Employment recorded a sharp 19% drop in regional oil and gas employment following structural shifts in global energy markets. The sudden departure of specialized corporate personnel left the housing sector exposed. The local multiple listing service reported a 76% increase in homes languishing on the market past the 90-day threshold. Real estate analytic models show that the regional market action index has dropped into deep buyer territory, forcing immediate price concessions from over-leveraged sellers. The stabilization of Colorado's macroeconomy has done nothing to alleviate the local structural decay in secondary mountain submarkets. The deep dive into current transaction data reveals that the crisis has progressed past a simple pricing correction, moving directly into an inventory-driven chokehold. Underneath the high-altitude aesthetic, individual municipalities are encountering an operational dead end where localized economic engines are stalling simultaneously. In Leadville, the geographical reality of operating at 10,152 feet has collided with shifting post-pandemic demand. Long-term housing studies commissioned by Lake County highlight a permanent imbalance. 68% of the local workforce is physically forced to commute from lower elevation basins because they remain completely priced out of the local market. This structural labor displacement has triggered a critical breakdown in basic municipal services. The real estate response has been decisive. According to data from Redfin, the median sale price for homes in Leadville dropped by 19.2% year-over-year. Active housing inventory has expanded significantly as non-resident investors attempt to liquidate underperforming single-family units. The median days on market has stretched to 98 days, an increase of 17 days compared to the prior year, proving that the local buyer pool has effectively evaporated. Compounding this inventory stagnation, regional utility data confirms that winter heating costs for Leadville's historical uninsulated housing stock rose by 41%, turning these properties into severe cash flow liabilities for casual out-of-state speculators. Redfin show, further south, Trinidad presents a stark case of structural failure resulting from regulatory shifts across state lines. During the initial phases of Colorado's recreational cannabis expansion, Trinidad served as a premier border town dispensary hub, capturing immense geographic arbitrage from travelers crossing over from New Mexico. This artificial commercial boom drove rapid appreciation in both downtown commercial footprints and nearby residential real estate. High Country News, however, the legalization of recreational cannabis in New Mexico completely eliminated Trinidad's unique geographic advantage. According to the Colorado Department of Revenue, cannabis sales tax revenues in Las Animas County collapsed by 34% following the opening of competing border dispensaries. This economic contraction immediately bled into the residential housing framework. High Country News show one local property registries indicate that the median time a home sits on the market has swelled to 135 days. Zillow tracking indexes show that 39% of active residential inventory in Trinidad is currently listed at prices below the original purchase figures from 3 years prior. Commercial vacancies in the historic urban center have scaled up by 28%, leaving behind an overbuilt real estate market supported by an economic foundation that has permanently vanished. High Country News, the regulatory environment has proven equally destructive in Summit County, specifically within the town of Silverthorne. Throughout the pandemic real estate migration, out-of-state speculative buyers acquired high-density condominiums and townhomes under the assumption that short-term rental platforms would perpetually subsidize their highly leveraged debt structures. This speculative assumption was invalidated when local municipal councils implemented strict caps and multi-tiered zoning overlays. Silverthorne established rigid short-term rental boundaries, capping active licenses across its primary geographic sectors. Crucially for the market, these short-term rental licenses do not transfer upon the sale of a property, instantly erasing the underwriting models used by incoming investors. Total tax burdens on short-term stays in Silverthorne have escalated to 6.375%, including an 8% town lodging tax and a dedicated housing authority levy. Phil Mervis. Summit County Realtor show 2. Concurrently, adjacent unincorporated areas within Summit County froze new Type 2 rental applications completely. This aggressive legislative tightening caused an immediate supply shock. Active residential listings on Realtor.com expanded by 115% relative to the peak of the speculative cycle. Redfin transaction histories show an 18% reduction in the median sale price for Summit County condos, as short-term rental revenues dropped by an average of 33%, leaving absentee landlords exposed to escalating homeowners association fees and high mortgage interest rates. In Grand County, the town of Kremling demonstrates the limitations of remote work insulation. Positioned away from the major resort corridors, Kremling attracted urban expatriates seeking geographic isolation during the early 2020s. The logistical reality of rural mountain isolation has since reversed this population movement. Regional transportation metrics confirm that the average one-way commute from Kremling to specialized medical centers or regional retail hubs exceeds 65 minutes. The resulting buyer remorse has heavily impacted local housing metrics. The Grand County Board of Realtors documented a 47% spike in withdrawn listings, representing properties pulled entirely off the market because sellers refused to accept prevailing buyer lowball offers. Zillow analytics show a consistent 3% month-over-month decline in median listing prices for the area, while 62% of active inventory has languished unsold for more than 120 days. The temporary population influx has decoupled from the long-term infrastructure, leaving local small business revenues down 12% and stalling the commercial momentum required to sustain residential valuations. This analytical tension is peaking in Salida, located within the Arkansas River Valley. Cultivated as a premier remote work destination, Salida saw its housing costs surge into the upper percentiles of the state's rural markets, as corporate entities, widely enforced return-to-office mandates. The artificial economic framework supporting these valuations, cracked data from the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, indicates that the active remote worker demographic within Chaffee County contracted by an estimated 29%. The real estate reaction was immediate. Active residential inventory in Salida surged by 138% year-over-year, as departing remote workers attempted to exit their properties simultaneously. Zillow data shows that the median home value in Salida has shed 22% from its historical peak, yet the local housing affordability index remains pinned at a restrictive 31 out of 100. Local wage earners are structurally incapable of purchasing these homes even at deep discounts, while incoming buyer demand has dried up, evidenced by a 41% reduction